Build Your Business listeners. This is Matt Reynolds, your host for the podcast, and you are listening to what we are calling the legacy episodes. And really, these are the pre-episodes that really led to this podcast, the Build Your Business podcast. This is really my life's work and my brother's life's work in building your business. And so they were originally published in the Barbell Logic podcast as part of the Principles or Coaching Success series, but really touch on similar topics to the Build Your Business podcast: how to improve your productivity, how to set and accomplish your goals, deprioritize urgent tasks, to focus on what is most important to you, and most importantly, to become a better person and leader and business owner overall. I'm proud to bring you these podcasts. Again, many years of life's work, several years of podcasts, and several decades of business ownership. Hope you enjoy them and learn from them. You're listening to Barbell Logic, brought to you by Barbell Logic Online Coaching, where each week we take a systematic walk through strength training and the refining power of voluntary hardship. You're listening to the Barbell Logic podcast. I am Matt Reynolds. I'm here with my little brother, Chris Reynolds. And today we are going to talk about something that you have always been good at and I struggle with. And that is self-honesty. And so I have always considered myself a boyishly good-looking human being, well endowed in all places. And none of those things are, in fact, are very true. But you have always had the ability to be honest with yourself, and you've continued to sort of flesh that out in your tired days as a senior citizen that you are now at the ripe old age of 38. So let's talk about self-honesty.
Yeah, I mean, I think about self-honesty like a map. You're given a map when you're born, even though we don't really know it, and then we go on this, maybe, if we're lucky, like a 90-year journey or something through life. And the map that we're given is the map given to us by our parents. It's our parents' map.
Yep.
And our parents' map is a perfect copy of their map, basically, when we get it. But immediately we start modeling and changing that map as we go and sort of think about things that our parents didn't know. And I think about self-honesty as another one of those core things that people have to continuously work on, but also if you do work on it, it improves your life enormously. And so it's another good example of a place where you need to focus some attention here and think about it, and it fits well within all of the other things that we normally think about as self-improvement, working out, reading, growing as a parent, as a partner to people. I mean, all of these things are really, really important. But when we think about self-honesty, the basic idea is trying to get to the point in your life where you are not deceiving yourself, specifically about yourself,
right?
But also maybe about other things as well. And so when we think about this, we use the illustration of a map. What happens as you grow up and you learn new things is that you come to find that the map you've been using to go from one place to the other through this journey of life wasn't perfectly accurate. It also wasn't perfectly inaccurate, and that's important. It's not like you're getting a brand new map. You're not burning the old map. You got to pull out the eraser and you got to modify the map a little bit. But the problem is, and I think this is where most people get hung up, it's really painful to change your map. There are things that can happen in life that make it even more painful to change your map. And so basically, if I'll use a very simple example, if I am of the opinion that left-handed people are all, they're all terribly irresponsible. All left-handed people, terribly irresponsible. The map that I got tells me that left-handed people are irresponsible. And I go on, radio shows and whatnot and tell everybody about my position on it. I've written 3 books, let's say, on how left-handed people are irresponsible. Very difficult when I'm confronted with evidence that left-handed people are just like right-handed people.
Right.
And I mean, I've spent a lot of time doing it.
Sure.
And this is another concept that I think about, the idea of being pot committed, which is kind of a term that is used, I think, in poker or something.
Yep.
You've just got so much time and energy and emotional investment in believing something. You maybe even have a group of people. You're all the people that are against left-handed people. And so in order to change your opinion about this, it's more painful. In our lives, there are so many things we didn't know as we were coming up. There are things we don't know now, that when we're confronted with new information, new data, it's kind of the adult responsible thing to do to evaluate it seriously
Sure.
and determine whether or not something about our map maybe needs to change. And you don't want to be necessarily too quick about this, but overall, if in the face of new evidence you don't change your opinion on something, that's an irresponsible thing to do.
Sure.
And so there has to be some framework by which we deal with that. And when we talked about several podcasts ago, we talked about reading and how important reading is. There is nothing that will bring more new data into your world, more new perspective into your world than getting into somebody else's head
Sure.
and reading an entire book from their brain, essentially. And so when that happens, there's a lot of things that you can do with that information. What most people tend to do when information comes to their attention that is outside of the way that they have typically seen the world is they discount it and throw it
They
away.
reject it. That's right.
They're just like, no, that's just not true. Easy. Hashtag fake news. We're done. Right.
Right.
Don't have to worry about it. Nope. Sorry. That is not an appropriate way to deal with the world. There was there have been a lot of good studies on this. The best thing you can possibly do in a circumstance like that is to look at that information and try to wrestle with it a little bit. Figure out how you might be able to weave it into your own worldview. And even if it's painful, I mean, even if you have to do things where you go, I was wrong about that. The best approach to life is to be wrong quite a bit and to be be forthcoming frequently.
Sure.
With how often you're wrong, because then it's easy. Then if you're the person who always is like, I can never admit that I'm wrong, then that's a tough position to be in.
Sure.
You really want to be in a position where you're wrong a lot.
Yeah.
And you're like, you know what? I was wrong about that.
That's right. You're willing to be. Yeah. Yeah. I think that this podcast has gone well for me personally over the last few years because my humor is often self-deprecating humor. And so when you're the butt of your own jokes, and everybody's always, I can't pass up a great story where I am the butt of the joke, or like the kind of like the joke's on me sort of thing. I like telling those stories because I don't have to hurt anybody else's feelings because I'm there. And so, I've talked before too on the podcast about people who are so rebellious that if somebody shows them, if another person shows them, hey, this is a better way to do it, their natural inclination is to say, I'm never going to do it that way because you told me that that's the right way to do it. What a terrible way to live your life. I want to live my life where everyone tells me the best way to do it and they're right, and then I just follow. I'm like, yeah, that is, now that I think about it, it is the best way. I'll just do it that way. Like, I don't have any problem changing my ways on things, right? And so it's, and I think for both of us, neither one of us, while you and I sit on pretty opposite spectrums, sort of like, especially with those big life things like religiously and politically, neither one of us are holding the same map that mom and dad had. Like, we have both completely, like, one of us went one direction, one of us went the other, and you and I get along just fine. But I think part of the reason about that is that we've both thought a lot about it. And so I think a lot of people just take mom and dad's word for the thing, and often they're ingrained, their culture ingrains that into them, and they never leave that culture. I think one of the things that business and business success has offered us is it's exposed us to an outside world outside of the Ozarks, outside of Arkansas and Memphis and Springfield, Missouri. Like, we've been exposed to the rest of the world. And so it allowed us to think about these things. And maybe the way they looked at it isn't exactly correct. And maybe some of it is. And it is. Some of it that they thought was great. They left us with a lot of great things. And so I think it's super important. So where's the place you start with this? We've talked about the philosophical. I'm thinking about things like, have you done or do you recommend things like the Myers-Briggs personality test or Jordan Peterson's Understand Myself or the Enneagram? Have you taken those before?
Yeah, I've taken so many personality tests at this point. I can't actually, I have to go back to the paperwork that I printed off with the results to remember which test is which.
Yeah, sure.
None of those, none of those exposed all that much for me on this front
Okay.
that I could tie a inborn personality thing, or even, whatever, a developed personality trait into this quality. I think the biggest thing about this quality is that it's about being comfortable enough with yourself that you can understand that you were wrong about something, or that
Sure.
you need to, that correcting your own perspective or your viewpoint or something about yourself is okay. I'll tell a story on myself, so I'll do exactly what Matt just said. Whenever the COVID thing hit, me and Matt and our mom and our sister were all texting. We got this text stream that we go back and forth on, just to keep up with each other and keep family ties close and make sure everybody's okay. And my mom one night, she said, okay, what I want to know is, what is the actual definition of presumptively positive
Right.
for
Oh, yeah.
COVID-19? I was like, oh, no problem, Mom, I got you. That means that you have all the symptoms, but the test hasn't come back yet. And Matt called me out. He was like, that's wrong. Exactly in those words. And then he corrected
That's
me.
when
and
you
said,
actually get
look,
tested, but the
yes,
CDC has
right.
not confirmed.
The interesting thing about this is I had to stop for a second and think about this for myself. I was like, man, I was totally wrong. I looked this up and I was just totally wrong. And it was a time for me to look back at my own, like, why that happen? Right. And some people would just dismiss it and sort of laugh it off and walk off. I don't. I actually look at it and go, wait a minute, I really don't want to spread misinformation ever. So this
Right.
is a tiny microcosm, but what is the source? And here's the source. When you read as much as I do, as frequently as I do, because it's my job, that's all I do. I can't always tell you where I learned something. I'm accumulating information really quickly, but
Sure.
I don't really necessarily know that I got it from a certain place. And I don't know always what I've learned from, let's say, a very credible source inside of a book, and I don't, versus what conclusion I've drawn on my own, or what I've read from a newspaper. I don't know.
Yep.
And so oftentimes I'll think that I'm right about something, and I'll just say it with an enormous amount of confidence. And I'll be totally wrong about it and have to be called out. And that's a trait about myself I would like to change.
Sure.
To do so, I have to take certain actions to do it. And I'm okay. I'm comfortable going, no one attacked me. No, Matt didn't attack me in that thing. It's just, I need to notice this thing about myself and find some way to do better in that.
Sure. Yeah. I've taken all of these personality tests, and also have lived, I've told some of my story in the podcast, especially in the early days, of some of the hard things we've gone through in life and in marriage. Since 10 years ago, more than that now, 11 years ago, my marriage was not in a good place, mostly because I was a dumbass. And then just like the hard things of life and the gravity of life, we've had miscarriages, and we've had tragedy in our family, and we've had major career changes, and all those things have occurred. And then, of course, now as the business has grown and we've got 70 employees or whatever, like, you learn, you have to be self-aware and self-honest about, especially when you're the owner and CEO of the company, where you're strong and where you're weak. And I don't want to ever surround myself with yes men. It's the thing I'm most scared about. It's the thing I've seen in other mentors in my life that ruin them, is they would surround themselves with people that would constantly tell them how wonderful they were. I want to surround myself with people that tell me, like, nope, you can't do it that way, right? And so an interesting thing about this is, I don't think I've ever said this on the show, and I'm actually even a little bit nervous even broaching this topic, is that Barbell Logic is known as a people company. We are a service company. We treat people extremely well, right? I am a low agreeableness, low compassion person, personally. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't care about my staff or care about my clients. I do. Most of those personality tests, the one that I think is the thing that exposes the most sort of uncomfortable things, is the understandmyself.com. I have no relation with that. Like, it's $10. Go take it. It's a blast. Understandmyself.com. But I've never met anybody that took that and was happy with the results, right? And what I found out about me is extremely high conscientiousness, extremely high industriousness, right? Fairly high on the intelligence scale. Like, I can focus and get shit done. No problem, right? Compassion, agreeable. I am a goal-driven person. I am working towards the goal. So what does that mean? What that means is that I hire my best paid people, my VPs of my business are all people persons. They are deeply compassionate, deeply empathetic, right? And that bleeds into me. And I've learned how to be self-aware enough to say, like, my personality is such that I don't want to have to think about that stuff. But I'm running a service business. Like, how important is compassion and empathy? Like, extremely. And so if I surrounded myself with other people who were just like me, we would not be a service company. We would not be a people company, right? And so I think it's just, and like your skill set, not you specifically, but the listener's skill set is obviously going to be different than mine or different than yours. But to recognize where your strengths are is important, and to recognize where your weaknesses are and surround yourself with people who build that up is it's paramount to be able to do those things.
One thing that softens the blow, I think, to a lot of that is to recognize, and a lot of people don't, they haven't noticed this yet, but usually your weaknesses are the reverse side of your strength.
Of course. You cannot be, that's exactly right. You can't, my wife is incredibly empathetic, compassionate, and agreeable. Very low industriousness. Now, I wouldn't have it any other way because we balance each other out extremely well. But I am able to get an enormous amount of stuff done because I am a bulldozer. I'm a freight train moving forward. And if I'm not careful, I'll run over people, right? And so I put people in my business that help cultivate that, pull people off the tracks. So when I'm going 200 miles an hour on the train track, I don't start running over people, right? But if I were more compassionate, I was more empathetic, I wouldn't be able to go 200 miles an hour on the tracks. So the thing is that when you get into times of crisis, like now, in the middle of the coronavirus, when I had COVID, I'm in the hospital and I'm watching people cancel their memberships because their gyms are getting closed. We have to move now to make corrections and help these people in a hurry. And if my worry was, or to reach those sales targets, or to grow the business, or do the thing, like those things are only, I'm able to do those things because I'm strong in these areas, but I'm weak in the other. And you never find the person that's strong in all of them. Like that person doesn't exist because, like you said, those things are antithesis of each other.
I think there's a core thing that happens there where, to have a really healthy relationship with, again, just being able to be completely brutally honest with yourself. If you're going to be honest at all, right? And I think honesty is a good thing to strive for. Being honest with yourself is probably number one. Later, figure out exactly how honest you want to be with everybody else. That's fine.
Yeah.
But be honest. Never lie to yourself,
yep.
right? Just know what it is. And I think a big portion of that is having a healthy amount of doubt. So too much doubt is a problem. I mean, you see people with just an enormous amount of self-doubt, and that can be yeah. And I think for a very healthy relationship to being honest with yourself is a matter of making sure that you have the right amount of doubt about what who you are, how you behave. There was a period of time, and maybe a lot of you that are listening to this have felt this before. I really felt like I was fairly athletic as a kid.
Sure.
I felt like I could do certain things that other people couldn't do. And as I got older, I sort of realized that my athleticism was mediocre at best.
Yeah.
I had to have like this moment of realization, like, okay, like I'm reasonably strong.
You were athletic.
One trait.
That's right. You were athletic because you played sports with me and my friends who were 3 years older than you.
Right.
So then when you went and played with your friends, you could dominate because you were playing with guys that were 3 years older than you. But then when you actually got to be 17, 18 years old with guys who would actually go to college and play sports, you're like, oh, that's what that looks like.
Yeah, it's just another example of a place where you're confronted with some evidence that maybe you don't like too much, but not liking it shouldn't really matter.
It doesn't make it not true.
It's just true.
That's right.
And so you need to just fold it right into the way that you see yourself and you deal with that appropriately. Now I know, I'm 38 years old, and guess what? I'm not going to be a world champion golf player.
Sure.
I am not a world champion golfer. I'm not. And so if I go out and play golf, now I have new information. I can go, okay, I'm going to play golf today, and I'm going to play purely for fun.
That's right.
Because if I don't do that well, doesn't matter.
That's right.
I'm not going to be a professional golfer. And there are things in life that are this way. I also think that when we think about our own growth intellectually, specifically, there are just so many things that we can't even know all the things that we think, that we believe, that we know from credible sources versus non-credible sources.
Sure.
And those are some of the most uncomfortable, because those are about worldview. There are worldview things that should shift as data shifts, as you learn new things, you learn new facts. And that is super hard for humans to do. But discounting the information out of hand because it's disagreeable, or it doesn't match your worldview, or you don't like it, you don't like what it says about you, or something, is not the best way to approach that information. There's no way to grow. The way you grow as a person is by understanding that information and moving it into your sphere of the way you see the world and the way that you operate with people around you.
Yep, absolutely. Man, that's awesome. Anything else before we wrap it up? Any practical information more that we need to take away?
I think the biggest thing for most people is just to try to recognize it. I think you got to find that spot where, if you want to start with a really easy one, think about the groups you belong to. And we've had other podcasts where we talk about this. Think about the groups you belong to, and then think about the opposing group. Think about a group that is on the other side, whatever it is.
Yeah, like if you were, say, like Joe Exotic, and you were like, hey, think about the friends that hung out with me. So, you're all gay. You love meth. You have mullets, lots of tattoos, and a bunch of illegal tigers. And then you're like, hey, what's the other side look like?
Right.
And you're like, listen, other side, let me tell you what the other side looks like. Carol Baskin, also a shitty person. So the other side. So maybe that's not the best example, but it is interesting to see. People love to hang out with other people that are just like them, that, again, give them that confirmation bias, right? Like, yep,
that's right.
We all love Trump, or we all love this, or we all love this religion, or we all love this thing, right? Or, we're all blue collar, we're union guy, like grandpa, right? Like our grandpa growing up, he's a union guy, right? He sheet metal union. So he literally didn't matter. He was kind of a Truman Democrat. That's what grandpa was. It literally would not have mattered if we had rounded up groups of people. If Democrats had rounded up groups of people and put them in ovens, grandpa's going to vote Democrat because they're the pro-union people, right? Because that was his group. And that was the thing that he identified as. Like, this is who I am, and that's who he was. And so I think it's very important to look around. That's why I think it's so imperative to have people that you are friends with who have different worldviews than you. We had a guy that lived with us for about 6 months. He was getting a divorce and lived with us for 6 months. Guy could not have been more opposite than me, especially politically, economically. And we got along great because I wasn't trying to turn him into me, and he wasn't trying to turn me into him. And we talked about it. We had great conversations about it. We had some decent debates, but they were never heated or angry, because we understood that both people still genuinely wanted what was best for humanity. You think about what without talking about ours, getting your political affiliation or the way you think about economics or the government's role and those sort of things. Nobody however you land on that aisle, the group that's on the other side doesn't land on that other side because they're evil and they want what's terrible for humanity. They also think that what they believe is best for humanity. And so when you recognize we're all trying to figure out what's best, and while we disagree about the way to do those things, it allows us to confront our own sort of lack of expertise, right? And weakness, and figure out where are the things that I have to be better at, or surround myself with people that make me better.
That's right. The approach is an approach of curiosity. That's all it is. If you approach something with curiosity, you can say, I have some facts and I have some basic understanding of this topic, but I may not be totally right about this. Let's figure this out together.
Sure.
With somebody who thinks differently than you. What's fascinating is you'll find almost never do you massively disagree.
Sure.
You a little bit disagree. And on some core values, you may disagree, but you're not going to change anybody's perspective on core values anyway.
Sure.
But you'll learn a lot
Sure.
about what they think and what happened, why they're rooted in a particular position. I think that's really important, especially again, as you read, as you approach the world. Reading is the one place where I feel like you will get so much information from someone else's head, and it's useful to evaluate that information. Now, I will say, you want to evaluate it critically. Critical thinking is very important in this. Don't you just accept everything that you read,
Of course.
just like you don't accept everything that you see on the news or that you see in social media. You need to approach it with a critical eye. But that doesn't mean that you deny everything that doesn't fit into your worldview. It's
Sure.
an important thing for personal growth to see that and to add it to what you think.
We have lost the ability today in general for Socratic debate. That Socratic method. The goal of that Socratic method was to come to find the answer together. And you might even land on different answers, but the goal was not to vilify the other person or to win the debate. And I think that's so often now what we see, especially in the social media world where everyone has a platform. Everybody has the box on the corner, the soapbox that they can stand on. And it's never about, or it's rarely about, coming to an answer together or rather than vilifying the other side or winning the debate. Like everybody's so focused on winning. This is a thing that for those of you guys that have been married, guys and ladies who've been married for a very long time. Like I remember Rachel and I have always been super close friends. You remember, even from like the time I was in junior high when she was one of my best friends. But early in the days of our marriage, in our first 6, 7, 8 years of marriage, we struggled with conflict. Conflict was bad. And we didn't like throw shit and break windows and hit each other and stuff, but it was just like, you could tell that both of us were in the debate to win the debate, not to resolve the issue, not to reconcile. And when you learn that one, it's been extremely helpful for me in the rest of my life and my business life and the people that I interact with. Once I learned how to conflict with my wife, it was like, listen, it doesn't matter who wins. What matters is like coming to reconciliation and a conclusion, that like an answer that like we're trying to figure this out together. Then you're able to take that into the rest of your world. And so it's been extremely helpful for us for sure. So there's lots there.
That's incredibly solid. One of the fascinating things is for people who actually really desperately want to win, right? I'm going to give you a little tidbit of information. One way to guarantee that you lose is to try too hard to win.
That's right.
Right? You actually can convince people to sort of move their perspective on something if you approach it in a collaborative way.
Right.
We're working on the solution together. And what's interesting is if you approach it that way, you'll find probably that you move a little too.
Sure.
And that they move a little as well.
Right.
And so I think this is just an overall approach to the world that is, I don't see enough of it in the world, to be honest. There's a lot going on. I mean, there's an enormous number of people that are doing this. They're just not on social media, or they're not frequently posting on social media. But in places like social media and in the news and all those places, everybody has the perfect answer and everybody else is the devil. And that is just a terrible way to approach the world. And so my suggestion to you is to incorporate a worldview that can move, that is flexible into adding additional information and new data.
Love it. So here's what I think you guys should do, and here's what I think you should do, Chris. And I have one I need to retake again because it's been a while. I think this week we should all take the Myers-Briggs test, which is free and only takes probably 10 minutes. The Enneagram, ENNEAGRAM, I think, which is free. And you should do understandmyself.com, which costs $10. And then we'll come back on a future show and we'll compare and we'll see what we're like, and we'll just be so we can get on this show and we can sort of shout from our soapbox about how you should be self-honest. Let's actually put it out there and let's actually read where we are, where we land, and you'll see where our weaknesses are and where our strengths are. It'll be interesting to see and compare. So don't share anything you get with me beforehand. And all you know about me is that I talked a little bit about the understand myself stuff. And so mine will mostly be fresh as well. And for our listeners, do the same thing. And then you'll know what you're walking through as we walk through it and know where you land as well. We'll go from there. So it's a great way to start being honest with yourself. So, hey, thank you for listening to another Barbell Logic Principles episode. If you love what we're doing, please give us 5 stars on iTunes. I don't know if you've seen, our iTunes average is 5.0. That's pretty good. And we're approaching 1,000 reviews. So it's pretty solid. Our numbers, in fact, I think
partly because of the principles series that we're doing right now, along with the MED series we had done in the past. Our numbers in March were the highest numbers we've ever had. Now, it could also be that everybody's at home with nothing to do and they're listening to podcasts. But we were about 20,000 more podcast downloads last month than we've ever been in any given month. So our numbers are fantastic. It sucks because podcast advertising ain't great right now because nobody's buying anything. So, there's that. We actually have all these advertisers. I don't know if I told you this. Tushy, I haven't said this on the podcast yet. So Tushy, by the way, do not go to tushy.com. That is not a site you want to go to. It's hellotushy.com/logic. I got on tushy.com in a first-class seat on an airplane a few weeks ago. Not good. Not good at all. It's not where you want to go.
It's an entirely different site.
Oh, my God. It was a different principle entirely. Hellotushy.com. So Tushy sponsored the podcast. I've been working on Tushy for a while. You guys know. Chris knows. I have never used toilet paper. I've always been a baby wipes guy. You guys all know this. You've heard. And then a few years ago, I converted from baby wipes to bidet, which is like a giant step up. I've always used Tushy bidets. I freaking love them. Tushy, I work on them. They sponsor the podcast. Coronavirus hits. All the toilet paper sells out. Guess what the next thing is that sells out? All the bidets. Tushy did about $9 million in revenue in all of 2019. They did $1 million in the first Friday of March.
Holy crap.
In one day. So it's awesome. So if you go, and this is not the official ad or anything, but if you go to hellotushy.com/logic, you get a pretty good discount off the Tushy bidets. And I think they're back in stock now. By the time this thing runs, they'll be back in stock. They're awesome. You don't need toilet paper, people. Like, that's archaic. You stick your finger up your rear end with a toilet paper. That's no good. Just give a little shower. That's what you need, a little shower. That's all you need. Anyway, we'll do the official ad at some point. I've been holding off on the ad because, there's either nothing to buy or the stuff that's good to buy, it's all sold out, like the Tushy bidets. So thanks for listening. Go get that understandmyself.com, Enneagram, and the Myers-Briggs, and we'll talk about our personalities here in a couple weeks. We'll see you guys.